Hey, students, this is Pastor Ryan again, and we're in our class number 3. And today we're going to be actually getting into the Bible and talking from the very beginning. How does it all start? And we're going to be talking about creation today. Now, thing to note is that God creates the world in 6 days, and we do have 7 days of the week. And on the seventh day, we're going to see that God rests. And we're going to talk a little bit what that means as well. But let's talk about how God creates the world. We see in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Holy Spirit was hovering over the face of the waters. Well, this right here is kind of like, it's hard to kind of grapple because it's not really concrete language of what's going on, other than we know that God is overseeing this kind of void, this messiness, this formless kind of thing. And we see then God exerting his power over it by speaking to it, and things are going to happen. And so he says, let there be light. And that's the first day. He separates the light from the darkness, and he calls it good. He sees that the light was good. He says, it's good. And then the next day, he sees the expanse of the waters, and he separates then the water itself from the sky and into the earth and everything else. He rearranges it and calls it the heavens or the sky, and then morning and day. So he separates the waters from themselves, from the sky. And then the next day, he says, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and dry land appear. So here he separated the waters, but now land is actually going to start appearing. And he sees on the now, what day are we on? First day, light. Second day, water. Third day, separating the land, giving dry land. And he sees and gathering together in seas and oceans, says that's good. And then he says, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seeds, and fruit trees bearing fruit. And earth brought forth fruit, and there was evening and morning the third day. So not only on the third day does he create dry land, he actually creates vegetation, fruit, all the plant life that we have. And then the fourth day begins, and he says, let the lights expand. And now he creates the stars, the sun and the moon and the celestial heavens, all the stars that we have, God begins to create on the fourth day. Then finally on the fifth day, he creates the water. He says, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, birds. So he creates fish and birds, and all of a sudden he says it and it happens, and that's what occurs. And then he creates all of those things, and he says to them, the creatures themselves, be fruitful, multiply, fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And so here we don't even know how many of kinds or even how much of those kinds or species of birds that he created, but he says to multiply. That's the fifth day. And then finally, on the sixth day, God creates the rest of the living creatures, livestock, creeping things, so insects, bugs, snakes, beasts. He creates all of these things. And then we have on verse 26, kind of like a little interlude, a little examination. So he creates all these things. All the creatures, says it's good. And then he creates man. Says, let us create man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God says, be fruitful and multiply. And then we do have in chapter 2, kind of another kind of closer examination of that specific creation, where God creates and kind of gives the details of how he creates both male and female, where he breathes life, creates man out of this, the mud, the dirt, clay, and he forms him and breathes his spirit into man. And man becomes alive. So we see something special. Not only does God speak man into existence, but there's this kind of intimate of creating him, molding him with his hands, and then giving his breath. Another word for breath often used in the Old Testament is spirit. The Spirit of God resides within man. And that's speaking about that image of God that we have. that we have the image of God, we have his spirit residing within us. And then we see Adam not finding someone to help him, to assist him, and he can't find none of the other creatures are suitable. And so God causes him to fall asleep, and then it takes a rib out of him, or a side or aspect out of him, and forms woman. And so out of that, we see Adam and Eve being formed. And that's creation. And then on the last day, the seventh day, God rests from his work. Now, this idea of rest doesn't mean that God just takes a nap and snoozes, but he rests, meaning he enjoys and looks at the beauty of his creation, of what he's done, and he delights in it. And I think that's the thing that we can talk about as well, as like, what does it mean to delight in God's creation and the gifts that God has given us, to rest? How do we rest? And to see the scope of what God intends. It's all for not just his glory, but for the beauty of his creation. All these things, and that how everything begins to work together, as we see today, as we look back and see how things are so intertwined together in God's creation. What a beautiful thing it is. Look forward to having a further discussion in your class. Thanks.